They're vile, villainous, and venomous. Buckle up, nerdlings, because today we are diving into the symbiotes of the Marvel Universe. What is up, nerdlings, and welcome back to my channel! If you're new, welcome. I'm your host, Danny Sansasi, licensed cosmetologist and registered super nerd, and this is Comics and Cosmetics, the channel where I talk about whatever nerdy topic I've been obsessing about that week while doing my makeup at the same time while you watch. Before we go any further, make sure you smash that like button, bond with the subscribe, and assimilate that bell. That way you get notified whenever I'm back with another one of these magnificent videos. This week, as I told you, from the future, I am covering a topic that is a very special request. Kid who's been my number one fan before I even knew I had any. This week, we're talking about the symbiotes of the Marvel Universe. Straight with you, I had no idea what I was getting into when I initially tackled this assignment. I did know some about the symbiotes, but clearly I didn't know how in-depth it went. So Ben King, this is for you. Dear Lord, baby Jesus, I had no idea that there were 40 symbiotes that were acknowledged in the Marvel Universe. So I'm not going to break them all down. Dear Lord, no. I am going to talk about, and yes, I know, I'm missing an earring. I didn't realize it till I got to work today. And, I probably won't find it for a year. So, woohoo. Go me. Killing it as an adult. But there are 40 of these symbiotes. So instead of just breaking down every single one, I am going to talk about how the symbiotes were initially introduced into Marvel Comics. And then we will discuss a brief history. Or an incredibly lengthy one that reads similar to the Bible. But first, a reading from the Book of Clintar. In the beginning, there was the void, a vast, black emptiness, a realm of empty space, ruled by Null. And then Null begat All Black, and Mr. E, and Void Knight, and Grendel, and Grendel's mother, and other symbiote dragons, and Clintac, and proto-symbiotes, agents of the cosmos, Triple Z Double X. And then Venom hatched from an egg, and he begat Carnage, and Phage, and Agony, and Riot, and Scream, and Lasher, and Sleeper, and Mania, and then Carnage begat Toxin, Scorn, and Raze. You see what I'm talking about here? Away we go. So symbiotes, as they are colloquially, that's a difficult word to say, colloquially? Colloquially. Am I saying that right? There's nobody there to answer, so. They're also known as, symbiotes, but their actual name is Clintar, as is the name of their planet. And we're going to touch more into that later. They are a species of symbiotic or parasitic amorphous aliens that bond with their hosts to create a single entity. Fun. There, they are able to alter their hosts' personalities, memories, even their physical form, and they do this by influencing their darkest desires. Ooh. They amplify their physical and emotional selves, that of their host, that is. They give them superhuman abilities. I could use some of those. Yeah. And like I said, there are more than 40 of these little guys running around the Marvel Universe. The known Marvel Universe. So there's quite a few of them. The first time the symbiotes appeared, clearly it was Venom. And he showed up in Secret Wars number 8. The black costume then showed up officially in the Spider-Man comics in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 252. Created by Roger Stem, Tom DeFalco, Mike Zeck, and David Michelinie. Now, first and foremost, you need to thank Mattel Toys for the creation of the symbiotes. Because had they not had Marvel do the Secret Wars run in 84 through 86 so they could sell more toys, they were like, hey, can you do something with like a bunch of superheroes all at once so we can like make a bunch of toys of them and sell them and make lots of money? And Marvel's like, I got you, fam. So we wouldn't have Venom or Carnage or Null without Mattel Toys. So in Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 8 in December of 84, we see all of our favorite heroes and villains have been kidnapped by the Beyonder and taken to Battle World and told, duke it out. Whoever wins is my favorite. So while on Battle World, Spidey is wandering around the fortress. We're not even really quite sure what Spidey was doing in this particular corridor, but he sees Thor and Hulk come out of this doorway. And he notices that Thor's helmet and cape that had previously been torn up and disheveled were all fixed. It was just like perfectly fixed. Well, he's like, hey, Thor, how'd you fix your costume? Like, you look great, man. And Hulk speaks up and he says, oh, it's in this room in here. Like, there's this machine. and it can make anything you want. All you have to do is think about it. So Spidey, who's like a kid, okay? He's a kid. And he's like, hell yeah, I could use a new costume. And as he walks in the room behind them, he starts to ask the important question, like, which would, oh, I'll find it. That's cool. I got it. So he goes in this room and apparently goes right up to the first thing he sees that, you know, may possibly create a new outfit for him. So he sits at this machine and puts his head in this metal dome. And he's like, okay, costume. So he's like, yeah, I want a costume. So he looks down and there's this black ball sitting on this like little tray. And I swear to God, the first thing he says is, well, I'll be an 8-balls uncle. So corny. Love it. I need new brushes, guys. Can you please join my Patreon, please, so I can get new brushes? I need new brushes. So he reaches forward and touches, you know, the ball that it has produced for him. And it immediately covers his hand and arm and then his entire costume. And it looks a lot like Spider-Woman's does, her black and white costume. And so he rationalizes it by saying, it must have sensed I liked her costume. It must have sensed I was thinking about her costume. Were you, Spidey? Were you? He even notices that it's got automatic web shooters. His had gotten kind of taken apart, 4 parts by Reed Richards. And he can jump higher, move faster. The webs he shoots from this are even stronger. Like, this suit really kicks ass. He's really enjoying it. Well, after they return to Earth, Peter is super excited about this suit. Like, all the handy features it has. Like, it's really making a difference. He feels stronger, more limber. Now, before they had left Battle World, Reed had commented on the suit, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and he'd said, I would love to study this suit sometime. So after the suit starts giving Peter these horrible nightmares and taking control of him in his sleep, he decides to pay Dr. Reed Richards a visit and allow him to take a sample of the suit and study it. This is when Reed realizes that, hey, this thing is alive, man. Like, yeah, you are inside a living being. That thing is all over you. You are like in the butthole of a living being. How does that make you feel? Not good, Dr. Richards. Not good. So Spidey, panics. Obvi, and tries ripping it off of him, but it won't come off. Well, the Fantastic Four figure out that it's sensitive to sound, and they blast it with sonic blasters and are able to separate Peter from it. And while they blast it with the sonic blasters, the Human Torch surrounds it in a ring of fire. And then Reed Richards traps it in a canister. Well, it escapes, as these things do, and goes back to Peter. He's like, Peter, I thought we had something here. Just bond with me. Well, Peter uses the bell of a church to force the thing to separate from him. And when he does, at the same time, down in the church, just so happens to be one Eddie Brock. Now, Eddie Brock had shown up before, just as kind of a disembodied hand. And he was a rival journalist. And when Spidey kind of debunked one of his stories, he lost everything. It like destroyed his life. So while he's in this church, this cop thinks that he's there robbing the poor box, the donation box. And he's like, you piece of shit. And he draws his gun on him because that's the first thing you should do when someone is completely unarmed. Well, when he draws that weapon on him, the symbiote had dropped down and attached itself to Eddie's foot, and not only, grabs the cop's gun and stops him from shooting him, but the symbiote extends a tendril behind the cop and pulls him down to the ground from behind. We find out that, Eddie, he wasn't there to rob the donation box. Eddie was actually there to kill himself. Now, way before all of this, Eddie was a big shot journalist. He had a great career. He had a huge reader base. People trusted him. They hung on his every word. He was living the dream, man. He was doing it. He was writing an article about a rash of serial murders going on in the city. This guy referred to himself as Sin Eater. Well, Eddie had a source, and he protected his source. This guy, by the name of Emil Gregg, claimed that he was the Sin Eater. Eddie writes his story. He's very proud of it. But being the journalist that he is, he didn't reveal his source. He wanted to protect him so he could continue to get more information out of him. Well, he started getting pressure from the police and his boss to let them know who his source was. And in a way, you can't really blame them, because if this guy is out there murdering people, you kind of want to put it to a stop, right? So reluctantly he gives up the name of his source. So he got to enjoy his huge deal for like an hour and a half. They catch the bad guy, and come to find out that Emil Gregg was serial all right, but he was a serial confessor. He wasn't really the real Sin Eater. Spider-Man debunks his article, and it is discovered that the actual Sin Eater was a police officer. His name was Stan Carter. Well, this did not bode well for Eddie. The Globe, the paper he worked at, became a laughingstock. And so did Eddie. Not only did he betray his source and give him up to the police, he was wrong. He was so wrong, and was humiliated for it, and then fired. He lost everything. His friends didn't want anything to do with him. His family. He lost everything. He couldn't get a job anywhere. He relocated. He tried to pour all his frustrations into working out because he heard that it reduced stress. It was really good for that. But that didn't work for Eddie. And finally, he decided he couldn't take it anymore, and he just wanted to end it all. So he goes to the church to end his life, And that's when he comes across Venom. Now, when Venom first touched Eddie, they immediately bonded because they both hated Spider-Man. Venom hated him because he rejected him, and Eddie hated him because he blamed him for the loss of his career. So they bonded very well. He ends up spending some time at the Four Freedoms Plaza, you know, one of the Fantastic Four buildings. And this is where we start getting the symbiotes fleshed out. Now, it wasn't until really recently that we really got the backstory, like where they legit came from. But it goes a little something like this. Way back before existence, there was the void, a vast, deep, dark nothingness of empty space. But it wasn't exactly empty. This was the kingdom of Null, a primordial deity. So before anything, there were these primordials, and Null, his realm was the void, was space. All of it, like all of it, was Null's kingdom. And he was good there. He liked it. Until the Celestials decided to come along. Guys. I was screwing with them. And they decided, you know what this place really needs? Some light and some life. It'll just zhuzh it right up. Let's just zhuzh it up. Well, Null didn't exactly care for this. You know, how dare they come into his house and start redecorating? He was not cool with it. So, in his anger, he reaches down into his own shadow and pulls out a sword. And he uses that sword to immediately cut off the head of the Celestial, like right there. He just like pulls it out, cuts his head off. That's some overpowered shit right there. He names the sword All Black. But you might know it by another name. Necro Sword, possibly? Yeah. The God Butcher, the God Slayer. Now, no one really knows when Null actually started experimenting and creating the sludgy parasites that we know and love. But he made them out of his living abyss. Although they were manifested on Earth in the 21st century, Null claimed that he first began experiment when he was stranded on a desolate planet after losing his sword All Black to Gore the God Butcher. Who saw that coming? The God Butcher stole the God Slayer. Everybody, well, I mean, it was right. Okay, moving on. While he's stranded on this planet, he starts toying with his powers of creation. He discovered that he could bond with lesser beings and control them. So he was like, okay, this is interesting. Well, after he's, fudging with them for a while, he learns that not only can he control them, but he can transform them into predatory beings. Oh. But the Silver Surfer encounters some of these parasitic beings when he was sent back in time till, before Null lost his sword. And, the Silver Surfer, he's the Herald of Galactus. All he can really do is be like, hey, Galactus, this planet's ready. Or, hey, Galactus, this planet isn't ready. No, I was kidding. He's very powerful. So, he creates other things. Like, he creates these dragons that later become known as Grendel and Grendel's mother. He creates the Void Knight, Mr. E. And sometimes these are kind of categorized as proto-symbiotes, a precursor to the parasitic ones that we are more familiar with. Rather than being symbiotes themselves, the Exelon are also a byproduct of nulls. But being imperfect, as he saw them to be, he tossed them into the exoteric latitude. Like, bye! A more evolved kind of cousin species. The variants also came into being at some point. And I say this a lot because there's no way of knowing when it actually happened, like when he actually did this, because this is all pretty much before recorded history or time. Well, these variants come into being, and they fed upon the bliss of their hosts. That sounds nice. I could use some bliss. And they could do this without causing any harm to their hosts. Like, you're going to make me strong and superpowered and feel lots of bliss. You're going to make sure I feel lots of bliss so you can feed off of it. And it's not going to cause me any harm. I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. But while this was all taking place, Null amasses this massive, massive army. He establishes himself as the center of their hive mind, and he used them to conquer countless planets over billions of years. It was a really long time, is what I'm saying. Eventually, they even invaded the microverse, where their very existence proved to be corrosive, like just toxic. They attempted to devour the Enigma Force itself, but were repelled by it. Like, did not work out for them. In the 6th century, 2 of Null's dragons find themselves on Earth, and they decide to attack Scandinavia. It was then that those 2 dragons became known as Grendel and Grendel's mother. Null's connection to the symbiotes was destroyed when a young Thor came and blasted Grendel with his divine lightning. Now these poor, unfortunate souls, these destabilized symbiotes sought out hosts to give their lives context and meaning. Like, for billions of years, proto-symbiote Daddy Null had been living in their heads and telling them everything. Like, everything they thought, what they were going to have for dinner, who their favorite Backstreet Boy was. He told them everything. And now that was gone. So they felt that need for connection. They'd had it for billions of years and now it was gone. They needed connection. The symbiotes on Earth then bonded with benevolent hosts. And these hosts kind of infected them with ideas like nobility, empathy, honor. Null would later go on to say how this was an infection, a poison. It was their venom. He said it. These symbiotes eventually rebelled against Null. They were like, hey, we know other things now. And we're able to make a decision based on context now. We don't like it so much. So they rebelled against him and they won. they end up imprisoning him in the center of an artificial planet. And it's then that we learn that one, the planet that the Clintar, the name for the symbiotes, were from, wasn't even really a real planet. It was just a bunch of amorphous symbiotes around each other, like Odo's planet of changelings sort of thing. And it's also when we learn that Clintar, in their language, means cage. So the name of the planet and the name of the symbiotes means cage. Because the planet is them. See? So they have this noble purpose to keep Null trapped in his cage. There were some of the symbiotes, the Clintar, left on Earth that were still loyal to Null. There's always that guy. And they started this apocalyptic cult worshiping him, hoping that one day they could set him free. Dun, dun, dun! That feels like foreshadowing. Ashamed of their dark and dubious origins, the symbiotes of Clintar made up and perpetuated a lie. The lie was that they were a naturally benevolent and honorable species. They developed a hive mind that would sense the voice of the cosmos. This is nice. And they created their own intergalactic peacekeeping society known as the Agents of the Cosmos. And they did this by using the symbiosis they needed to exist, but only transforming hosts and bonding with those they deemed worthy. They wanted to find these worthy warriors and transform them into the ultimate peacekeeping warrior. And they would make sure that they were transcending themselves as well into the perfect symbiotes. And in order to do this, the host had to have the perfect blend of physical and moral attributes. If not, the resulting symbiosis would corrupt both the host and the symbiote. In desperation to distance themselves from their unfortunate origins and past, any corrupt symbiote would be eradicated. They would be cut off from the hive mind and sometimes killed. Their first option was to, cleanse this symbiote. But if they failed to pass the trials or relapsed back into corruption, that is when they would execute them. I gave you a shot. Sorry, no second chances. The exiled, corrupted symbiotes resumed just infecting left and right. They would take over entire planets and spread what the benevolent symbiotes, the agents of the cosmos, considered to be disinformation, especially about the benevolent counterparts, the agents of the cosmos. Despite the efforts of the agents of the cosmos, their corrupted brethren ruined their reputation, and they were back to being considered and widely known as these awful, parasitic, world-destroying beasts. It became common knowledge that these parasitic, world-dominating creatures would, dominate their hosts mentally and physically while simultaneously feeding off of their hormones and fluids. Like, good times. These corrupted symbiotes would force their hosts to perform terrific and spectacular and terrifying feats. Things these creatures would have never done otherwise. And they did this so that the Clintar, the corrupted Clintar, the symbiotes could feed off of their adrenaline. Namely, this is really hard to say. Phenethylamine. 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 Love phenethylamine. Eventually, the host would be drained completely, just exhausted from the constant stress and them draining their fluids and phenethylamine and adrenaline. And they would just drop dead, like right then and there. So the host would, eventually drop dead, and the symbiote would just move on, find another host, and start the whole process over again. At some point, a colony of feral symbiotes encountered the Silver Surfer. Like this guy again. Now what? They had conquered a planet that, they had conquered this planet, and, the Silver Surfer was the herald of Galactus, the devourer of worlds. And so Galactus eats the planet, and it really intensified their instinctual fear and hatred of the Silver Surfer. And this kind of continued on through their genetic memory, which, they have. While it's reported that, since the corrupted symbiotes are cut off from the hive mind, they're unable to unlock their full potential or their full power or ever reach it. But there have been cases where really old ones that have lived a really long time, have become more and more powerful after bonding with multiple successive hosts. They can develop, by doing this repeatedly, they could eventually develop a resistance to sonic waves, sonic weapons that create sonic waves. In some cases, they can spontaneously mutate and develop new powers. Like Carnage and Mania could develop the ability to infect others from pieces of their biomass, like pieces of their body. Venom and Carnage actually feed off of their host's negative emotions. That sucks. I mean, if you're going to feed off of it, does it mean you take it away? Can you just have them? Please? But they can convert those negative emotions into more biomass, so they can get bigger. Boy, I got a lot of stress and frustration. I'm just saying. Now, farther down the lineage, successive generations of a specific symbiote line can become more powerful as it goes. The feral symbiotes tend to be indifferent to their progenitors and their progeny. Like, they don't care. Like, it's nothing to them. Many corrupt symbiotes, such as Venom and Carnage, Toxin, Triple Z, XX, they have appetites for the flesh of other creatures. And in order to satisfy this urge, they will force their hosts to commit heinous acts of cannibalism. For this reason, the feral symbiotes consider themselves the ultimate predators. And they are regarded with just about as revulsion, disgust, and disdain and terror as you would expect from most species. Yeah, nobody likes them. At least one feral corrupt, at least one feral symbiote, Carnage, has been able to convert organic matter into more biomass so he can take organic things and make himself bigger. Feral symbiotes, or corrupt symbiotes, are so much better at bonding to their host when their host has similar urges as they do. So, homicidal maniacs, they work really well for them. For example, Eddie and Venom bonded so well because they were both bent on revenge over Spider-Man for what he did to both of them. In addition to reflecting and reacting to their host's emotions, the symbiotes can also impose theirs upon their host, assuming complete control over their host's body, mind, and emotions. For example, Annie Wang was terrified and revolted by Venom when she had to bond with him at first. But eventually she started to really dig the power the more Venom, imposed his will onto her, and eventually started to really get into, the bloodlust. So they're able to change their hosts over time. While Mac Gargan and Flash Thompson were often overwhelmed by Venom's bloodlust, symbiote influence over its host can be resisted and repressed, especially through sedatives. I mean, willpower works, but drugs are better when it comes to repressing symbiotes. Now, you can weaken them with sonic weapons, separate them from you, but as we said, they can build up that resistance, kind of like adapting and evolving over time, either through, a bunch of hosts or, having more symbiote babies down the line, which, by the way, they reproduce asexually. They can either spawn, like create an entire symbiote, or they can lay an egg, save it for later, which is how Venom was born. Venom, as I said 2 seconds ago, was hatched from an egg, and he was hatched on Clintar. He was bred to be an agent of the cosmos. He was one of the benevolent symbiotes. He was the 998th iteration in his lineage. He first bonded to a Kree soldier named Tel Kar, but later the memory of this was erased from him. Like, he had no recollection of this first bonding. They were forced to separate, and after they forced to separate, bye-bye memory. The being that Venom bonded with next, his next host, wasn't a nice guy. And as far as he's concerned, because of his memory being erased, this was his first host. This is who he first bonded to. This is what he remembers. And this guy was the inhabitant of this icy planet. He was definitely an unworthy host, and he used Venom to exact genocide and revenge on his homeworld. Wow. Eventually, Venom joined a group of corrupt Clintar, but he joins this group, and they used their hosts like chattel. They meant nothing to them. They'd use them up and then just let them drop and move on. They were labeled as deranged, and able to form this really super strong bond with their host and protect it at all costs. Eventually, he gets captured and imprisoned in a canister. And this is supposedly where Spider-Man found him on Battle World during Secret Wars. Well, later, this is retconned. Is funny. It's retconned that Deadpool went in the room before Spider-Man did. And Deadpool, he found the machine first and puts on the new suit first. But Deadpool notices right away that something ain't right. And he realizes this thing is alive. And he's like, nope. And separates from it. And put it right back. And then just walks away. And Spider-Man walks in directly behind him. And you know the rest. I'll be an 8-ball zonkel. While Venom was bonded to Eddie Brock, he proved to be an incredibly malicious foe. He was incredibly bloodthirsty and was really good at helping Brock get back at Spider-Man. Now, while Brock was in prison for his crimes against literally everything while he was Venom, he had a cellmate. And his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy. Cletus Cassidy was a vile serial killer, and they didn't exactly get along. You know, Brock was just basically chilling in prison like a villain, waiting for Venom to come free him from his cell, which he does. But in doing so, he left behind his spawn. Ew. I mean, that's just bad parenting, Venom. He leaves behind his spawn, who then subsequently bonds with Cassidy. And let me tell you, it was a match made in cannibal serial killer heaven. This turns Cassidy into the lethal villain Carnage. And he and Carnage bonded on a cellular level. I mean, cellular. This made them incredibly powerful. Venom and Eddie never bonded on that cellular level. Eddie wouldn't allow it. He was like, that seems like a bit much of a commitment for me, and I'm not ready for that. Well, Carnage turned out to be such a vicious, evil badass that neither Spider-Man nor Venom could subdue him on their own. So they had this very tenuous alliance where they teamed up to take Carnage down together. Carnage was much more capable of controlling his constituent matter than Venom was. This means he was able to create blades and tendrils and tentacles and axe heads. Like, seriously. He could create all kinds of weapons using himself and Cassidy's body. He even managed to travel by telephone wire by making himself a cell thin, like it was a single string of his material, a cell width. Super creepy. You know, snakes and spiders don't really bother me, but the idea of something like that really freaks me out. Like, what if something like that were real? It's too much. It's too much. You know, Carnage also seemed to be more dense and more resilient than Venom, and this was all due to that really deep cellular bond he had with Cassidy. At one point, Venom was captured by the Life Foundation. This was a company that had more money than Daddy Elon. And their whole goal was to prep for nuclear annihilation. Basically, what they were doing was taking money from their clients to make sure that their clients, and specifically their clients, would survive nuclear holocaust, and pretty much just them. Boy, would they survive well. They were even researching a way to create a superhuman police force to kind of police and protect their perfect post-apocalyptic society. Towards the end of this research, they extracted the last 5 seeds that Venom had, and they manipulated, nurtured these seeds, and bonded them to 5 of their best security guards. They eventually called them the Guardians. These were supposed to be their perfect post-apocalyptic police. Say that 5 times fast. They became known by their individual code names: Agony, Riot, Scream, Phage, and Lasher. Due to how they were extracted from Venom, the effect of the environment they were in, or, both, they were even more mutated and crazy than Carnage, but they were still underdeveloped, so they couldn't fully communicate with their hosts. After taking several dedicated L's, one of these, of the Life Foundation symbiotes, Scream, has a complete psychotic break, mostly due to the fact that her host was already diagnosed as schizophrenic. She decided that all Clintar were evil and that they all had to be eliminated, including her siblings. So that's what she started doing. Now, realizing that the actual symbiotes were surviving this, it was the hosts that she was killing. For a while, the symbiotes were kept in a high security facility, a prison called the Vault, but they were freed from the lab they were being tortured and experimented in by a guard named Scott Washington. He decided that they weren't really evil, they were kind of products of what had happened to them, and they didn't deserve to be treated this way. He felt like nobody deserved to be resigned to this lifetime of torture and pain, and this is something he could understand because he had lost the use of his legs after being the victim of gang violence. Because of what those 4 symbiotes had gone through, the only way they could survive was if they merged all together, forming Hybrid. Hybrid, that single symbiotic entity that the previous 4 had formed, then bonded with Scott Washington, and they actually healed his legs. Like, he regained use of his legs again. That was nice. He began exacting revenge on the gang members that had been tormenting and destroying his neighborhood. Like, he decided, I'm going to be a superhero now, called Hybrid, with these crazy symbiotes, and just start killing gang members. That's what he did. One time, Spider-Man actually convinced Brock that Venom was just using and controlling him. So Brock asked Venom to separate from him so he could have some time to think about this. He needed some space. Ladies, we've all heard this. Well, this upset Venom so much he felt rejected, and he let out this psychic scream that was so powerful that it brought more of the Clintar to Earth. Wah, wah. Well, using an innocent host, Venom and the other symbiotes that heard his psychic cry constructed a portal to a planet of beings that had been enthralled by the symbiotes, and thus began their invasion. Yeah, good job, Venom. Good job, Brock. Good job, Spidey. Like, can't you just mind your own damn business and let people work out their relationships for themselves? You started a whole worldwide alien invasion because you just couldn't mind your business. Like, you and MJ are just so perfect. Well, Brock realizes that the Clintar are sensitive to human emotions. So he rebonds with a now very remorseful Venom, and he releases a wail of anguish so great it kills almost every single one of the other symbiotes. They become aware of a xenophage, little derivative, but I'll allow it. And this xenophage eats Clintar. But he super wanted Venom. Probably because he was bonded to Tom Hardy. And let's face it, he is super yummy. Please be the new James Bond. I'm sorry, what? Oh, symbiotes. Symbiotes. I'm sorry. Tom Hardy. During a fight with the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, a piece of Venom's tongue gets cut off. It was then used to clone him, thus creating Mania. Mania went on a frigging rampage. Like, full-on rampage through the Arctic facility where it was created. It was revealed that the clone, Mania, had been programmed by a nanite alien. And this alien's name was Bob. Now, Mania was being pursued by another nanite alien called the Suit. Okay? You got Bob and you got the Suit. Well, Bob had programmed Mania to destroy all of humanity if it were to ever reform with Venom. Now, Mania was bonded to Patricia Robertson, who was, well, eaten by Venom. Years later, Agent Venom, when the Venom symbiote was bonded to Flash Thompson. Yeah, I know. Just, it's comic books. It's weird. Flash attempted to protect his student, Andy Benton, from Jack-O-Lantern. Told you. And Venom barfs up Mania. And he does this to kind of purge this demon. We'll touch more on it later, but the demon-possessed clone Mania then bonds with Andy, who defeats Jack, so yay, but then wanted to avenge the murder of her father. Mania goes on to fight crime in Philly as Mania, but gets targeted by the Department of Occult Armaments. They got some great departments in Marvel Comics. Now, the agents that were targeting her were Crossbones and Master Mayhem. So Crossbones and Master Mayhem are these Department of Occult Armaments agents who are chasing after Mania. With the help of Agent Venom and Mephisto, she was able to defeat both of, the agents from the Department of Occult Armaments. I just like saying that. So much later, Carnage realizes he's about to spawn, and he's never been repulsed by something more in his entire existence. The idea of him just creating a spawn of his own is just vomitous to him. He has no interest in it. And he had even decided that as soon as it spawned, as soon as it was birthed, he was going to kill it. But after he does give birth to this spawn, he's so weakened by it, he can't kill it. The newborn bebe symbiote then bonds with Officer Patrick Mulligan. Venom had warned Carnage about spawning. He said that every 1,000th or so generation or iteration of symbiotes, the genetic memory that they have breaks down, and the symbiote must be corrected by its grandparent. Because Venom wasn't able to do this, the new baby symbiote just drove Patrick Mulligan crazy with questions. This new symbiote didn't know anything, and so it thought Patrick would know and just kept asking him. Pretty similar to a toddler, like, but why? But why? But why? But most toddlers don't have, quite as much homicidal urges as this one. Now, Mulligan tries to balance life, work, family, homicidal, symbiote, crime fighter life, but eventually he is murdered by Blackheart, who takes the Clintar and bonded it to clones of X-23. Now there's the shit of nightmares right there. The name that Patrick came up with as a crime fighter was Toxin. Eventually, Toxin was stolen by Crime Master and bonded to Brock. At first, it took complete control of Eddie, like Eddie wasn't able to resist or control the symbiote. And he took control of Eddie because he wanted to kill Grandpa Venom. Eventually, they worked out a similar relationship that Brock had with Venom. But then Eddie finds out he has cancer, and then he finds Jesus. And he starts to be disgusted and revolted by the behavior and the bloodlust. He starts getting really worried for his immortal soul at this point. I mean, of course he would. So he sells Venom to Don Fortunato. Okay. He then gives it to his son named Angelo. Now, Venom is just revolted and disappointed by Angelo. He thinks Angelo is a big stinking coward and he's not here for it. So Venom leaves him and bonds with Mac. Gargan was afraid at first, of the influence that Venom exerted over him. When it forced him to eat people. But later, he became totally cool with it. After the events of Brand New Day, Brock started working for Martin Lee and Aunt May at the Feast Foundation. And thanks to Mr. Lee's mysterious powers, Brock's cancer is cured. And it also kind of mystically, permanently fuses the remnants that were left over from the symbiote to his white blood cells and alters them on this mystical level. Gergen bursts into the Feast Center looking for Spider-Man, but he sees Brock, and right away Venom's like, "Oh!" and goes to bond with him. But he's like kind of repelled from it because Eddie's new cells are almost incompatible or like corrosive to Venom, and it changes what parts of Venom that touched Eddie and touched those white blood cells, it changes him into anti-Venom. And anti-Venom was corrosive to Venom. Anti-Venom could heal. It could heal other beings, other creatures. And later, Eddie would sacrifice his anti-Venom symbiote to heal the world and inoculate the world of the spider virus. After reports of Carnage's death is greatly exaggerated, he is returned to Earth. Yay! Hall Industries uses him to produce advanced prosthetics. Now this is something I'm interested in. Dr. Tanis Knives was given one after losing her right arm. The biomechanical prosthetic was like a cyborg Clintar. And this was the spawn of Carnage, known as Scorn, which, Tanis does choose to bond with to stop Carnage. Following separating from Gergen, Venom was bonded to Flash Thompson, thanks to the United States military, of course. But they had kept him on a sedative to help him resist Venom. And Venom admitted that despite his relationship with Brock and having been bonded to Spider-Man, Flash Thompson was his favorite. When not suppressed, Venom tended to rampage a lot and would attempt to eat people, and later showed a desire to, get demonic powers, which is where, he bargained with Mephisto. Never a good idea. But he did receive a Hellmark, yay for him. The demon that was implanted in him in Mania was implanted there by Damon Hellstrom, the son of Satan. During Flash Thompson's tenure in space as one of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Venom started becoming really erratic. He eventually took total control of Flash, as well as various other members of the Guardians. And this continued until he finally reached his destination, this place where he was being led to, which happened to be the planet Clintar. There, the Guardians of the Galaxy met with the benevolent Clintar, the agents of the cosmos. They revealed themselves as the origin of the species. They explained the reason why Venom was becoming erratic was that once he got back into space, he was able to connect with the hive mind again. And at first it was confusing and disconcerting until he got closer and was able to, get a better connection and understand what was happening. They were trying to lead him home to Clintar. While he was there, they were able to repair his corruption and he rebonded with Flash. He better. But he bonds with a stupid space pirate named Mercurio and relapses, but Flash is able to talk him down like a good bro does. Tony Stark actually eventually creates this endosim armor, like this hybrid of symbiote armor, and even admits that he thought ahead and removed the sonic weakness. Like, it wasn't smart. It wasn't Tony's finest moment. Now, Triple ZXX, whom we've mentioned before, was a feral symbiote not in Venom's lineage, but he was captured by the Shi'ar Empire, and he was classified as one of the most dangerous creatures in the entire universe. He was bonded to Raza Longknife, serving as a guard to Vulcan, but he was separated from Raza, imprisoned, and killed by Ego. Now, Spidey was forced to bond with a symbiote, for a power boost, and he controlled it with the help of the telepathic No-Girl, which caused it to take on the appearance identical to the Venom symbiote. He ultimately lost control of it, but it was subdued and separated from him. Now, all Clintar were taken away from the planet Clintar by the poisons in order to forcibly bond them with powerful hosts so they could assimilate them. However, they were eventually defeated, and the symbiotes returned to their home world. Unfortunately, Null had started to awaken, and the cult dedicated to him brought back Carnage from the dead, using Grendel to use him as an apostle. As a remnant, a codex is left in the host's body. Okay? This connects to the Clintar hive mind, actually. And Carnage decided to get as many of the codices as he could in order to awaken Null. Eventually, Grendel and the codices were assimilated by Venom, which did awaken Null. Not great. His awakening destroyed Clintar, shattering into countless individual symbiotes that eventually merged into a fleet of symbiote dragons to resume his conquest and destruction of the universe. Making his way to Earth, Null and his symbiote dragons conquered and destroyed planets belonging to several spacefaring civilizations, including Krees, Skrulls, the Shi'ar. And when he got to Earth, Null killed Sentry, bonded Earth's heroes to symbiotes, and engulfed the planet in a symbiote dome. After Null killed Brock, he constructed a spire atop the Empire State Building and used it to remote pilot various symbiotes take place in various battles. Eddie's son Dylan, who had symbiote powers similar to Null, eventually entered the battlefield to avenge his father. After many counterattacks from Earth's heroes, Null's connection was severed by the Valkyries, and so was his control of the heroes he had defeated, thanks to Marvel and Dylan. When the Silver Surfer arrived with the God of Light, Null's, total opposite, it took possession of Brock's body and resurrected him and transformed him into Captain Universe. Eddie obliterates Null in the core of the sun. freeing the symbiotes and thus becoming the King in Black. After Null's defeat, the Hive swore fealty to Brock, and thus enabling him to speak through them, see through their eyes, and remote pilot them. Of course, only if they agreed. Under Eddie's command, the symbiote hive executed Carnage. Finally, liberated the homeworld of Gore the God Butcher from marauding space pirates, repaired the fault when it, tore open and threatened to unleash the Cancerverse. Is the whole universe a cancer? Who thinks this shit up? However, all this put an enormous amount of strain on Brock's body. This caused him to age very rapidly over the course of the next several months. Now, many of the Clintar chose to stay on Earth and take new hosts, but found themselves still pretty much feared and hunted. They'd only been murderous, cannibalistic, parasitic, dominating bastards for billions of years. You mean we can't be best friends yet? We've had symbiotes in the Marvel Universe since the 80s, but we've only had a couple live-action versions of a symbiote. The first being Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3. Give you a moment to repress that. Poor Topher Grace. And then, of course, we have Tom Hardy as Venom. I'm going to need a minute. And, of course, Woody Harrelson was in Let There Be Carnage as Cletus Cassidy, Carnage. And who can forget the after credits scene in Spider-Man No Way Home and the end of Let There Be Carnage when he transports to the 616 and he leaves a little bit of Venom behind. I wonder if that's going to show back up in the MCU later. I'm pretty interested to see, the MCU version of a symbiote. Let's make that happen, guys. Okay? Well, anyway, nerdlings, that's all I got for you today on symbiotes in the Marvel Universe and my symbiotic look. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you devour that like button and assimilate the subscribe and ring that bell so you can get notified whenever I upload more content. If you would like to be kept up on everything comics and cosmetics, make sure to follow us on all the socials. We are on every single one of them. If you would like to support the channel, please do so by joining our Patreon. You will be privy to behind the scenes content, tutorials, sneak peeks, chats, merch. You get merch. And you get to talk with yours truly and drop a little request in the request box. That's a little special treat just for you patrons. And we also have a TeePublic store if you would like to purchase any of our very sweet comics and cosmetics merch. Anyway, nerdlings, that's going to wrap it up for me. Have a wizard weekend, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.